Det er helt fantastisk at være her. Forliset om Titanic har altid fascineret mig. Og jeg har læst mange bøger om emnet. Men der er nogle spørgsmål, jeg aldrig har fundet svar på. Hvordan må byen, der stolt byggede Titanic, oplevede tragedien? Og hvad med i dag? Hvordan har byen det med denne del af fortiden? Det er de svar, jeg søger. Derfor er jeg taget her til Nordirland.
Belfast er i dag den 14. største by i Storbritannien og den største by på den irske ø. Der bor ca. 0,5 million indbyggere i byen. I dag er Belfast centrum for industri, kunst og erhvervsliv og den økonomiske motor i Nordirland. Historisk set har Belfast været centrum for den irske hørproduktion, tobaksindustri og skibsbygning. Og det var ikke mindst det sidste, der i højeste grad satte Belfast på verdenskortet i begyndelsen af 1900-tallet.
Jeg har hørt, at en af de bedste måder at komme rundt i Belfast er ved at bruge en af de lokale taxichauffører, der også fungerer som guide.
Hi, are you Billy?
Hiya, Kirsten. Welcome to Belfast. I'm Billy, yeah. You coming along with us? We're going on a bit of a Titanic adventure around the city.
Yeah, I want to know everything you know about Titanic and Belfast.
Well, come on, let's go.
Thank you very much. So people, when they come here to Belfast, do they know that it was actually built? Titanic?
It's actually surprising. A lot of people don't know because the film itself, you know, the big movie made in 1997, 98, and there was very little mention made of Belfast in it. And I think that was because Belfast at that time, you know, it didn't really want to be sort of associated with the legacy, of, you know, of the time. And I think in the movie they didn't actually, you know, the name on the back of the ship said, you know, it's where it was registered was Liverpool, and everybody knew its home port was Southampton. So nobody really realised that actually that this is where it came from.
This is where
Belfast. Yeah.
How do they react when they hear that Titanic was built here?
Quite surprised, you know, and then you tell them the rest of the story. Like Belfast wasn't just known for the Titanic, an awful lot of other things, and they maybe are a wee bit surprised. And that gives them maybe, like yourself, you know, you want to go off and actually adventure and find out just more about this city.
Første stop på min tur rundt i Titanics fodspor er Ulster Folk and Transport Museum. Her har Billy aftalt, at jeg kan mødes med William Blair. Han er en af de ledende historikere på de nordirske museer, og sikkert den rette til at fortælle mig, hvordan det hele begyndte.
You're William Blair?
Yeah, welcome to the Ulster Folk and Transport Museum.
Very nice. I'm very looking forward to see it.
Titanic is the product of an almost uniquely successful relationship between two companies. Harland and Wolff, the Belfast shipbuilder, and the White Star Line. the shipping company. And that relationship began in the 1860s. And the two companies together in many ways almost revolutionized the transatlantic shipping business. There was a 50-year business relationship prior to the construction of Titanic. There were three enormous liners commissioned at the same time simultaneously to meet the challenge of Cunard. Cunard had launched the Mauretania and Lusitania in 1906, and those two ships were at that time the largest and fastest ships in the world. So that presented a challenge to the White Star Line, and the Olympic class ships were the response, in a sense. The first of the Olympic class ships was Olympic, and it was launched almost a year previously to Titanic, and it entered service in 1911. And Titanic, in a sense, was the middle sister, and the third sister ship, Britannic, was ultimately built and launched in 1914.
So why was it built here in Belfast? Could it be built in like another city?
Yes and no. No, it couldn't, because of the relationship between the White Star Line and Harland and Wolff. Harland and Wolff built almost all of the ships for the White Star Line. For over 50 years, there was constantly a White Star Line ship under construction in Belfast. So in that sense, it couldn't have been built anywhere else because of that very special relationship between the two companies. Belfast is an unusual location for a great shipbuilding industry to arise, because Belfast had none of the raw materials normally associated with industrial development and industry. Everything had to be imported to Belfast. We had no coal, no iron. Those are normally the staples for industrial development. You know, it was quite an unusual location, but in many ways it was really about the enterprise and the skill of the workforce here that made it possible. And that's really what Belfast had. It didn't have the raw materials, but it did have the people and a very highly skilled workforce. And certainly the people who worked in the shipyard at that time, you know, they would have seen themselves as almost being the aristocracy of labour. They were very skilled workers. They were relatively well paid. They would have seen themselves as being kind of, you know, special, building remarkable things. Olympic and Titanic, which were the first two to be, the first two of the three to actually be designed and built, they share the same set of design plans. Olympic, which was launched in 1910 and entered service in 1911, was essentially a carbon copy. Titanic was a carbon copy of Olympic. Many of the plans are actually titled by the ship's yard numbers. That was the number that they would have been referred to in the shipyard. Olympic was number 400, Titanic was number 401. Most of the plans are actually titled 400-1. And what's interesting, actually, you can see in some of the plans where there have been amendments made to the plans which relate to Titanic, and they're often prefixed 401. But Titanic, in that sense, in terms of when you look at our plans, the actual traces of Titanic are often, you know, annotations in red pen on a set of plans, where they've simply made an adjustment, you know, based on the knowledge that they've gained through Olympic being in service for 8 months, and then they make some refinements. That's what you see in the plans, these little annotations that relate to Titanic.
Harland and Wolff, I think, at the time, they would have, although it was an all-male domain, there would have been women working in it as well, doing like the soft furnishings and that, you know. And also, they didn't just employ welders and riveters. There was actually whole workshops of artists, and that was their job, to maybe paint wooden panels.
Yeah, for it.
Probably a sort of artwork that would have sold for, you know, thousands of pounds if it had come out of a French gallery.
Yeah.
At the turn of the 20th century, it was coming from a shipyard, so it was, from people who were describing themselves not as artists, but as shipyard workers. Shipyard workers, Kirsten, it was always a hard and dangerous job. So I suppose they worked hard, they played hard. And the shipyard worker, at the end of the week, the weekend, he'd always like to have a beer. And we still have a few bars in the city that would be sort of traditional style bars from that period.
Really?
The early 20th century. A good one's a Crown Bar.
Yeah.
They do a great pint in there, so they do. Fancy going for
Can
a
you
pint?
show me that one?
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So
And it's
what-
traditional in Belfast that the guest always buys the host the first beer.
I like that.
All right.
Okay, then take me there.
It was built originally in 1849, and that's just a couple of years before Edward Harland came to Belfast to build the shipyards. It's called the Crown, and I got the name the Crown because it probably hasn't escaped your notice. In Belfast, there was always a little bit of political conflict between the Nationalists and the Unionists, or the Catholics and the Protestants. So I got the name the Crown because the husband and wife had owned it. She's a Protestant, he's a Catholic. So she insisted on calling it the Crown. He said, "We called it the Crown." He laid a mosaic of the Crown at the front door. So as everybody enters, walks in the Crown.
It's a very amazing place.
It is. This was like a Victorian. This was built during the Victorian period, and in Belfast they would have called the pubs in the Victorian gin palaces. Well, I think it was because it was built maybe just to provide a place for the royalty of drinkers, you know.
So this has actually been like the place where some of the workers who worked on Titanic would go.
Certainly, the pubs in Belfast in the 19th, early 20th century, there would have been this sort of model. You'd have had the long bar, marble top bar, with a footrest on it, you know, a brass footrest, and you'd have had usually the tiled floor. And these little, I don't know, I think these are actually unique too. I've never seen these anywhere else. These little boxes, that's what we call them here, boxes. In England, they'd maybe call these a snug, but the boxes would have ran the whole length of the bar, right down one wall.
So what would they do like when they went here? Were they singing and dancing?
Oh yeah,
or?
you'd have had the music bars. Certainly, a lot of pubs would have had a piano in them. So certainly, these pubs on a Friday and Saturday night would have been reverberating the banging of the keys and the piano and somebody singing them. People in Belfast would know hundreds of songs, but they would always seem to know just one tune, and it was the Belfast tune.
How about tomorrow? Can you take me around in Belfast?
Certainly, we'll continue on our adventure tomorrow. So we're going to great odyssey across Belfast to see what we can find. You know, still, well, we can take around the city that is still connected to the Titanic.
Very good.
So, Sláinte.
Sláinte.
Det er utroligt. Byen emmer mere af Titanic, end jeg troede. Men det er stadig svært at forestille sig, hvordan byen så ud for 100 år siden. Jeg ved, at Billy vil tage mig ud til den gamle tegnestue, hvor tiden nærmest har stået stille. Her skal jeg snakke med Una Riley, der er en af de førende Titanic-eksperter her i Belfast. Og hendes oldefar var med til at bygge Titanic.
We are here in the very heart of the Titanic story in Belfast. It was in this room where the plans dreamed up that night in London by Lord Perry and Bruce Ismay were produced on paper, and then the ship itself was built just outside those windows. So this is where Titanic was conceived, if you like, and she gave birth out there. So this is a very, very important building. It was designed to let in as much light as possible because electricity way back at the beginning of the century wasn't as great as it is today. But it's a beautifully designed room. And even if you come into this room like it is today, you can feel a sense of history, a history we're very proud of.
But how would it look like at that time?
Well, the men who worked here were known as the work staff, and they would have been the white-collar workers, the guys who didn't build the ship. Those who built the ship were known as the workforce, and they worked out in all weathers. The work staff worked in here. Those who the workforce had to come into work and were given a little wooden board with a unique number on it, and that allowed them a day's pay. The people who worked in here clocked in with a card, and the workforce would not be allowed in through those big front doors. That was definitely a no-no. They were not allowed in here, and they would come in by the big green gate at the side of the building. So in here they had a very formal dress, and in the photographs that you can see of what it was like in 1912 in Titanic's time, the men are all very well dressed, starched collars, and they're wearing an albert or a watch on a chain, and they're working very industrially. So if you look very carefully in that photograph and you look at the room today, you can actually see where possibly the ghost of that character still resides. It was a hard life. The workforce would start work at 6 o'clock in the morning, and the hooter would blow and the gates would open and they would go in. The gates would then close, and if you were late for work you had to wait for 2 hours before the gates would open again at 8 o'clock when the hooter would blow for breakfast time. Now, it was run on very strict lines. You could only stop work when the hooters blew, and then you could make yourself a cup of tea. And what they did was they had a can which they put over, they lit a little fire and they boiled their can to make tea. If you were found doing that outside the allotted times, the foremen would kick over the fire and put your name down in a book, and you would be fined for doing that early. We have discovered a book where some of the workers were fined for smoking, for playing football, for skylarking.
And you said that they started working at 6 o'clock, and when did they?
They started at 6, and then there was a breakfast break at 8, and then there was lunch for an hour. It was called the meal hour. And again, at that time, they could relax, if you could call it relaxing. Again, they had to find a spot out there that wasn't wet or cold or whatever. And then the hooter would go at 5 o'clock, and then they would all stream out of the yard all at the same time. So you can imagine at the height of the workforce here, when there was 30,000 people, a very important group of workers was the riveters. The riveters was a team of men, and they actually could make quite a bit of money because they were paid for every rivet that they put in. And at the end of the day, the rivet counter would come round and count how many rivets that they had done each day, and they would be paid for that. So the team had to work very well together, very, very hard together. And they started off, the rivet was a sort of sausage of steel that was put through 2 holes that had been pre-punched in the in the steel plates, and the red hot rivet had to go through that hole and then hammered down at both sides, and as it cooled down it contracted and pulled the two sheets together, and so you had a heater boy who heated it up, and when it was at the correct temperature, and they knew by the colour, and this all had to be done terribly quickly, he threw it to the catcher boy, right, who caught it in a bucket or something, and then he had to run to put it into the hole where it was held up by the holder-upper, and then the two riveters, one a left-handed and one a right-handed, banged it into place, and then they moved on to the next one. So it was a conveyor belt, and the noise must have been horrendous because there was banging going all the time.
Again.
Hi, Kristen.
It was really interesting. You still feel the soul in there, like this kind of a holy place in a way.
I know, you could, the sanctuary, I suppose. You can imagine, you know, if you were an apprentice in Harland and Wolff, you'd start your apprenticeship maybe as a 16-year-old, and you'd have had to go in there. You'd have probably been in that building twice in your life. Whenever you went in to sign on as an apprentice,
yeah,
to hand over your as an indentured apprentice, you would have to pay £5
to go, yeah,
to buy your apprenticeship.
Really? Yeah,
and then
yeah.
Whenever you'd completed, 5 years later, you got the £5 back. Obviously, it belonged to your mother or your father. They coughed up the money to put you through your apprenticeship. And if you didn't finish your apprenticeship, you lost the £5. So that would have been the first place you'd have gone to.
Jeg har engang hørt, at tragedien om Titanic er en af de begivenheder, der er skrevet mest om. Men et er at læse om det. Noget andet er at være her i byen. Her kan man mærke sjælen og finde spor fra selve skibet. Billy har fortalt mig, at her i byens rådhus er der eksempelvis mange spor fra Titanic.
Well, right now we are in the Lord Mayor's dressing room in Belfast City Hall. Now this room is very, very special because this was designed by a past Lord Mayor, Viscount Perry, who was also a director of Harland and Wolff, the shipbuilders, where the Titanic was built. And he designed this beautiful room. It's all made in mahogany, the only mahogany in the City Hall. The rest of it is all oak. And you can see it has portholes up here, and for the maritime theme because of shipbuilding. So an exact replica of this room was put onto the Titanic to the captain of the Titanic's dressing room. A lot of the people who worked on the hand carving here later went on to work onto the Titanic.
And how about the staircase? Is there something special about that?
The staircase, yes. Well, the staircase here is marble, most of it Carrara marble from Italy, and the same shape of the staircase was put onto the Titanic. Theirs, of course, was wood and not marble.
So it was actually, they were inspired by the staircase here?
Yes.
To the very famous one on Titanic.
Yes, exactly.
Næste stop på min rejse gennem Belfast er det smukke gamle pumpehus og tørdok. Her skal jeg mødes med Colin Cobb. Han har stiftet Titanic Walking Tours, der er en af de førende turistattraktioner i Belfast.
This is the original pump house. This beautiful building was built by the Belfast Harbour Commissioners, and they own the land. And they built the pump house to pump the water out of the massive Titanic dry dock. So that's what it does. It's called the pump house because it has pumps inside.
But was it built just because of Titanic, or?
Well, I'll have to go before that because people say, was the dry dock built for the Titanic? The answer is no. Why is it no? Because the dock was actually designed in 1900 and they started building in 1904. Titanic wasn't even thought of until 1907. So they had already started building the dock long before Titanic was even, heard of. But they were building that dock for ships like the Titanic in mind, those kind of ships. And Titanic's sister ship was the first one in, called the Olympic, and then the Titanic came in afterwards in February of 1912. So this pump house was built especially for the Thompson dry dock, which housed Olympic and Titanic. Obviously, with Titanic being the biggest ship in the world, she was down here in this area for 10 months. I mean, she was built on the slipway for 2 years, launched as an empty ship, towed round to outside the dock, and then all the thousands of workers had to come down here and get onto the ship every day, putting in her engines and her boilers and her funnels, bedrooms, the grand staircase, the elevators, the electric cabling, all had to be done to build the world's biggest ship, and then eventually into the dry dock for her final fixtures and fittings. So they got the world's biggest ship, the biggest pumping engines in the world, the biggest winches in the world, the big capstans that turn around to pull Titanic in, 80 tons of torque on each one of those winches to pull the world's biggest ship in. The world's biggest dock, the world's biggest door to open, the world's biggest shipyard. Belfast was the industrial heart of Ireland at that time.
Is it possible I can get down into the dry dock? Yeah.
Absolutely, and that's what we're going to do now. We're going to get ourselves right down, step down into history, 44 feet down into the bottom of the dry docks. I think we should go and do that. So, stepping down into history. Watch your
Very
step
scary
there.
here.
Yeah, watch your step. Step this real steel plate hull here. And here we are, down into what is called the Thompson Dry Dock, or in other words known as the Titanic Dry Dock. And this is the last place that Titanic ever rested on dry ground. It's what we call her physical footprint in history. And it's from this massive dock that Titanic left for that infamous maiden voyage back in April of 1912. This dock that you see took some 500 men to build. Took them 7 years to build it at a price of £350,000, and it was opened in April of 1911. The dock itself, well, you have to fill it with water first of all to get Titanic in. It actually holds 21 million gallons of water. Now in Denmark, for you guys, that's 85 million litres of water.
Really?
For the Irish, that's 168 million pints of Guinness, of course, that we have to, that can be contained. And our wonderful
That's quite a lot.
That's a lot of Guinness. Before the Irish get through that in one weekend, you know. Actually, the pumps can pump out some 85 million litres of water in just 1 hour and 40 minutes. That's about 2 average-sized swimming pools every 60 seconds they can drain through the bottom of the dock. And Titanic will rest on these, what are the original keel blocks. And Titanic sat here so that the men could now physically get underneath the hull and they could paint that ship and inspect it, and then she'd be sent on her maiden voyage. But now we're at the head of the dock. Just turn around and have a look at the biggest dry dock in the world when it was opened in April of 1911, and the last resting place for the RMS Titanic on dry ground.
It's amazing. I mean, you can really feel the history here.
Absolutely. This, as I said, is where Titanic last sat on dry ground. She'd already been constructed over a 2-year period on the slipway, and whenever she was launched in May of 1911, she was nothing but an empty ship. And this is about 1 kilometre from here. This is Titanic when she was launched.
Really?
No engines, no boilers, no funnels, no bedrooms, no luxury, just an empty hull of the ship. And then this little tugboat towed the Titanic down the River Lagan. They brought her right the way around and placed her outside the dry dock for 10 months. And sitting outside the dock to put all the engines in and all the boilers and all the heavy equipment, they had a massive floating German crane. Now, this crane sat outside the dock with the Titanic and put everything in. And there's one of the boilers that would provide all the steam to power Titanic's massive engines to propel her through the water. So after 10 months of work, a photograph was taken just at the top of the dock, and this is the shot that was taken, as you can see.
Jesus.
So almost complete. This wonderful shot. This is where we are down at the dock at the moment, this massive dry dock for Titanic to be housed in for the last fixtures. Titanic is almost ready by this stage, but not quite. There's 3 final things that need to be done to the Titanic.
So it's just up here, Titanic there, yeah.
Literally outside that door, which weighs 1,000 tons, the entire Belfast lock, the sea is behind that door. If that makes you feel more comfortable.
Yeah,
Some
it does,
40 feet deep. And Titanic sat outside there. Now, Titanic was almost ready, but she needs some final fixtures and fittings in the dock. In February of 1912, they filled this whole massive dock with water, some 85 million litres of water. The massive door at the end, it slides hydraulically to the right and under the concrete. Titanic was pulled into the dock by the captains all the way in, and I will show you a shot. As Titanic was brought in, the door is closed and the water is pumped out of the dock, sucked through the floor in just 1 hour and 40 minutes. And Titanic rests on these keel blocks. And so the men,
These are the
original keel blocks that Titanic sat on. And they weigh some 4.5 tons on each stack. Now, 4.5 tons is the weight of 3 family cars. So massive, heavy indeed. And this means that Titanic could rest, these are the originals, Titanic could rest on the blocks, and she sat here for 2.5 weeks. And she had 3 things done to her. Hull inspection, painting, and the massive propellers were put on as well, all done inside the dock here. Propellers, hull inspection, painting, a photograph was taken of her in the dock, and this is the shot that they took from just above when the water was pumped out and Titanic rests on dry ground. And that's the shot. We're down here at the bottom of the dock.
This is just like this of Titanic. Yeah.
Well, to help with your visual, this excellent shot was taken from the side. This photograph was taken from here, across the way, and you can see the corner roof of the buildings here. Okay, this shot was taken from the side. We are standing literally right there, underneath the hull of the Titanic, above us.
It's so.
That's where we are right now.
Yeah.
And this is her literally above you.
It's massive.
It was the world's biggest ship.
I can imagine, yeah.
It was 1,000 tons heavier than her sister ship, the Olympic. And there's another shot taken from where we're standing.
Okay, I'm getting a bit scared for standing
Absolutely.
right under it.
You imagine if she was above you, 46,328 tons.
Just above you, yeah.
Yeah, just
and
sitting right here.
walking.
And the men have to physically get underneath the hull, right underneath, to paint her, to inspect the ship, and to do what they need to do. If Titanic had survived the iceberg collision, she would have had to have come here into this dry dock, because this is the biggest dock in the world. There was no other dry dock that could fit the Titanic literally right here, and she had to be here for any repairs. Well, we do have a national motto in Belfast, a saying I want you to take back to Denmark and tell her back there that Titanic, she was all right when she left here. Nothing wrong with our ship, and that's what we're going to say. We probably think it's more the English captain, the Scottish navigator, and the Canadian icebergs, but certainly not the Irish. So what we're going to do now is going to take a walk right down to the very end of the dock, see some more stunning photographs, and of course talk about the men who actually built this wonderful ship.
Perfect, yeah.
Right.
I'm looking forward to it. Taking the long walk.
Det er noget af det mest fantastiske, jeg har oplevet, at gå her i tørdokken. Jeg tror, at det må være det tætteste, man kan komme på Titanic i dag. Det er faktisk lige før, at jeg kan mærke skibet og høre alle lydene fra den gang. Metal, der bliver hamret ind i metal. Mænd, der råber. Og i hele taget lyde fra et skib, der bliver bygget.
So this is the door and the sea is just right behind it.
Yeah, this is the original, what we call a caisson gate. It's like a floating door, like a large Chester box type construction. And it's made from 1-inch thick Scottish steel. And that's the same steel that they used on the Titanic. It's even riveted together in the same way the Titanic was made as well. So when you look at this massive door, which is now 100 years old, and look at the age of it and the condition it, if you raised the Titanic from the seabed tomorrow and placed her on dry ground, she would look a bit like this door that you're looking at right now.
So it's just the very same material.
Same material, same men, same rivets,
Amazing.
same time, same machinery, all the same, and looking at a bit of history literally right there. To really bring this to life, I have a wonderful photograph to show you that was taken from about where we're standing, and it's literally right here if I can show you. This photograph, this is the door that we're looking at now, and we know it is because there's a hole in the door, which is right there with the pigeon. There's a bird in the door there, you can see. It's as good as a home for a pigeon there.
Yeah.
But this is a drainage hole because the door is a floating door. It can float if need be. So that's a drainage hole. That's the same hole. If you look carefully, there's the wall, same brick wall.
It's there, yeah.
Yeah. There's the workers standing underneath their wonderful creation, the Titanic. There's the same keel blocks that we mentioned earlier. There they are, literally to the left here. The same original ones that Titanic sat on. That's an amazing photograph.
They're very huge.
Huge,
Yeah.
huge propellers that could drive Titanic at some 23 to 24 knots through the sea, some 50,000 horsepower. You know, Belfast hasn't embraced the Titanic story. They have now, but for many years after the Titanic disaster, the people of Belfast felt ashamed of the Titanic, that it was associated with here. We built it, it sank on its maiden voyage with a terrible loss of life, some 1,500 people. And so the Belfast people did what they do best. They just didn't talk about it. They didn't want to talk about this terrible tragedy. It's taken 100 years. It's taken the discovery of the wreckage. It's taken a Hollywood blockbuster movie for the people of Belfast to finally realise that, yeah, we've got something to be proud of here. We're going to embrace the Titanic story.
Det er ikke mærkeligt, at byen følte en så stor sorg, da Titanic gik ned. Det var et helt særligt skib. Jeg vil prøve at mødes med Una Riley i aften. Hun var frontpersonen bag at stifte The Belfast Titanic Society tilbage i begyndelsen af 1980'erne. Hun må om nogen vide, hvordan byen reagerede, da nyheden kom frem, at Titanic var gået ned.
Quick, Kirsten, get in.
It's so cold.
Oh, it's cold out there.
Yeah, let's drive.
Well, how did you enjoy that?
It was so amazing.
Fantastic.
So yes, I went down into the dock, the dry dock.
You'd have been lost in there. You can imagine like a 16-year-old apprentice working down there, looking up. you know, the Titanic, just like would have been a skyscraper for him, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Amazing.
For many, many years, Titanic was not talked about. After the sinking and the shock and the horror of what had happened to this great big ship that we had watched grow in the gantries for 3 years, and we sent it away with waving flags and singing Rule Britannia, the shock that we all felt was quickly overtaken by an even worse disaster, which was the First World War. So it was not talked about again. It was not mentioned again until the 1950s when actually a local man, James McQuitty, decided to do a film on the Titanic called A Night to Remember. But the shipyard here would not allow him to do any filming because it was thought it would reflect badly on the city. But now we have finally picked up again in the pride of the ship. It was the craftsmanship. The people of Belfast sent that ship away full of pride. As I say, what happened to Titanic was a disaster. She was not. Our late president, his father worked on the ship. He actually saw the ship on 3 separate occasions, and on one occasion his dad took him round to see it in the slipway, and he was only 6 years old, and he looked up at the big wall of steel that he was standing beside, and he says, "Dad, how will this ship stay up in the water?" And his dad said to him, "Johnny, that ship will always stay up in the water." But little did he know that this ship was to sink. When the news came back to Belfast that the ship had actually sunk and he had lost some of his best friends, John always reported it was the first time he saw his big shipyard worker of a father break down and cry. So it meant so much to Belfast. They recovered, they went on. It wasn't the end of Harland and Wolff. There was about 11,000 men worked in the yard at the time of Titanic. At its height, there was 30,000 men worked on it. So the sinking of Titanic was not the sinking of Harland and Wolff. It still went on and on.
Det er ingen tilfældighed, at det er her på Robinson's Bar, at jeg vil mødes med Una. Her har hun nemlig en helt speciel udstilling.
All the artifacts here are actually connected with Titanic in some way. We have a poster which is advertising the trip that never happened, the return trip from New York. The fact that this still exists is amazing, given that after the disaster, these posters would have been stripped off the walls and have just been consigned to the bin. We have letters written aboard Titanic, letters talking about going to the new world and full of hope and joy. The things were going to get better, maybe bringing the family out afterwards. But these people did not survive. And you can see behind me Philomena, the Titanic doll. She was picked up in the wreckage after the sinking, and at first it was thought to be a baby because it was floating, but it turned out to be a doll, and she has made her way back to Belfast. Whether she originally got on at Belfast is probably not the case, as the doll probably belonged to either a first or a second class passenger, and they all got on at Southampton or Cherbourg.
Det virker til, at Belfast i dag er på vej op og ser anderledes på historien om Titanic. De er i hvert fald ved at bygge et helt nyt museum. Det må jeg kigge nærmere på i morgen. Det har været 2 helt fantastiske dage her i Belfast. Det har været meget overvældende, og jeg har fundet ud af meget mere om Titanic, end jeg havde forventet. Nu mangler jeg bare at kigge ind i fremtiden. Jeg har aftalt med Billy, at han kan køre mig ud til mit sidste stop på rejsen.
It's raining a lot today.
Very rarely it rains in Belfast.
Very rarely.
Well, it started off an absolutely stunningly beautiful autumnal morning.
Yeah.
Then it sort of deteriorated. Well, we'll have a word with the Minister for Weather for you for the next time you're coming back, okay?
Oh, that would be very nice. So
See if we
we're
can get
sure
some
that the sun will shine all day.
We'll order some sunshine for you.
Yeah.
So, Kirsten, this is the last stop, Titanic Exhibition Centre. It's been fabulous having you here this week. Come back again.
That would be very nice. Thank you for all your time.
Thank you.
We're building a truly iconic building. We believe it's an iconic building for Europe and for the ages. But as well as that, its position. We will have the largest Titanic exhibition in the world here. But the location that we've put it at is at less than 100 feet in front of the building is the site where the Titanic was built. Over on 100 feet to the right-hand side is the 2 drawing offices where the design of the ship was conceived and delivered. Then just behind the building is the gateway into Harland and Wolff, where over 15,000 workers come into Harland and Wolff every day. And then to our left-hand side, we have the River Lagan, where the Titanic first set sail from. So really, to our mind, it's the most unique location, the most relevant location, other than where it currently sits within the mid-Atlantic. The inspiration for the building has many different elements to it. So we have 4 hulls that emanate from a centre diamond within the building. So as you stand outside on the plaza underneath the building, when you look up at it, you see this magnificent hull of a ship. Now, we've clad it different than a ship would have been cladded, but it's the same height as the Titanic would have been. So you stand underneath this fantastic size of a hull of a ship. As well as that, if you were to look at the building from overhead, it's actually the shape of a star, which is a reflection of the White Star Line, which was the cruise line that developed the Titanic as well. So there's lots of subtle symbolism within the building of the ship. This is a new time for Belfast, for the city itself, and this is a great opportunity to start celebrating that story. Yes, there's some history which goes and says that people were a little bit ashamed of it in a certain way, but I think now people are beginning to realise within Belfast and around the world as well that this was a fantastic achievement for the people of Belfast. This is something to be proud of. You know, we didn't sink it. You know, they built it here. And it's a fantastic achievement, and that's something that should be celebrated.
So you're building this also to remind people in Belfast about this huge achievement that happened at that time.
In our centrepiece that we're going to have in the atrium, we are going to use a few key words, and some of those are about pride, it's about endeavour, it's about achievement, and it's about vision. And those words are as relevant today as they were 100 years ago when the ship was being built. There's a lot of innovation in this city as well, which we tell in certain parts of our stories. In the final galleries, we tell that story as well. You know, it's a city that's moving forward, that's striving to move forward, and is achieving that. And this tells the story of both what happened here 100 years ago, and still that ethos and spirit is still here, although it's been manifested in many different ways.
Før jeg kom her til Belfast, var det lidt vanskeligt at forestille mig, at dette lille hjørne af Storbritannien kunne bygge en af verdens mest omtalte skibe. Men det, der har slået mig mest, er den utrolige arbejdsånd, der gjorde, at man kunne skabe et så storslået skib uden brug af alle de moderne maskiner, vi har i dag. I stedet blev det bygget af den nordirske stædighed og stolthed, som man også kan mærke her i Belfast i dag. Og jeg tror, at det er helt rigtigt, at byen i dag fokuserer på dette særkende. Jeg tror faktisk ikke, at det var muligt, at Titanic kunne være bygget andre steder. Heller ikke i dag.